Vice Chancellor.
Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good morning, Vice Chancellor. Yeah.
Can we start, madam?
Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this knowledge dissemination series. In today's webinar, we have the topic lined up as environmental governance, 3 approaches to make a change. But first, I would invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Malini Shankar, to give the introductory remarks. Madam, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. And a special welcome to Dr. Sunil Shastri to join us all the way from United Kingdom. Dr. Shastri, we've had a couple of interactions before, and you know about the changes that we are trying to bring about, the initiatives that we are taking in the Indian Maritime University, in all the 6 campuses put together. So one of the key things is for the students to hear leaders from around the world, experts in their respective field, so that they can widen their perspectives. They can understand the larger picture of the sector and and its contribution to the entire economy, the global economy, as well as the national economy. Because I firmly believe that classroom lectures are necessary but not sufficient. Exams are necessary but definitely not sufficient. And what helps generations of students is their exposure to maybe the outside world, the kind of people they interact with, the perspectives that the speakers bring. I, as a student, have benefited from that, and I would like our students as well as our faculty. There are many faculty who would benefit from that, because it removes them from the mundane humdrum of everyday life, whether it is teaching or learning, and expose them to new ideas, new perspectives. So this is this is the background, and hearty welcome to you. And I would urge the faculty as well as the students to listen and to have an open mind. And I hope this will be a value addition to their personal as well as their professional corpus of knowledge. Thank you, Dr. Balaji, for convening this together. And I presume you will be giving an introduction of the speaker, or should I do that?
Yes, madam, I will do that.
Okay, thank you. Incidentally, we are also, for Dr. Balaji, the faculty as well as the students, one of the things we are looking at is to establish centers of excellence, not just in name, but actually functioning centers of excellence, which will in the future be a torchbearer for the specialization that these centers will have. And one of the centers we are looking at is ocean governance, which covers a huge spectrum of subjects and topics. And I think that was the specialization of Dr. Shastri, and we will definitely benefit from that to see how we go ahead and establish the center. Sorry, Mr. Balaji, for taking those additional minutes, but thank you. Yeah.
Not at all, madam. Thank you very much. So today's speaker, Dr. Sunil Muralidhar Shastri. He's a consultant, expert, and speaker in ocean and environmental governance. He found his passion for Pacem in Maribus in 1982 under the tutelage of Elizabeth Mann Borghese, and has since made it his mission. He is best known internationally for his masterclass in ocean and environmental governance and for his erudite analysis and candid opinions. Sunil has attended at various times the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, International Ocean Institute, Aachen Technical University, Dalhousie University, the London School of Economics, and the Harvard Kennedy School, supported throughout by prestigious scholarships. In the past, Sunil has been an academic and researcher in marine and environmental policy, a consulting ocean engineer, and an academic and a researcher in mining and ocean engineering. Sunil is a Rotary International Paul Harris Fellow. He was born in India in 1955 and has lived in the UK since 1988 with his wife and his son. It is our pleasure to have him with us. Today's session is in two parts. The talk followed by a question and answer session. Over to Dr. Sunil Shastri. Please, sir.
Professor Balaji, for your kind introduction, and also Dr. Muthukrishnan, the academic consultant, for having gone through the emails back and forth and organized the date and time and everything for me. I'm really grateful to all of you, and I'm really glad that so many of you are here. I want to say things from my own personal experience. I'm not going to talk about some great philosophy or some great ideas. These are personal experiences that I want to share. And Vice Chancellor Shankar has mentioned that my expertise is in ocean and environmental governance. So I'm going to give you a kind of a gist of what ocean and environmental governance in my mind is all about. It is not focused on the ocean. It is not focused on the environment. It is a very general talk, but I think it just sort of gives you a flavor of not so much my philosophy, but the philosophy of Elizabeth Mann Borghese, whom the director alluded to in my introduction. So let me first share the screen and hope the technology works. Please tell me you can see the presentation. Hello?
Yes.
Yes. But can you make it full screen? Is it possible to make it
full screen?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have done it. Thank you.
Yes.
So there you see the topic is ocean stroke environmental governance. Three approaches to make a change. Now, these three approaches are my personal approaches. My name is Sunil Muralidhar Shastri. I'm a consultant, expert, and speaker in ocean and environmental governance. And I'm really honored to be speaking to the Indian Maritime University today. So before I begin, I want to introduce you to my logo on the top right-hand corner, and it says Ocean and Environmental Governance there. And below that, you will see 6 circles. Now, the 6 circles, the first one represents people. The second one represents the planet Earth, or planet Ocean, as I would like to call it. The third one represents this whole idea that the profit motive that has driven humanity or driven mankind. The fourth circle is about equity. The fifth circle is about justice. And the last circle, the sixth circle, is the dove of peace. So I'll talk a little bit more about these when we get into the talk. But I just thought I want to put that in your mind to introduce my logo. Now, this is a picture some of you may or may not be familiar with. So this is the Western United States, and the route that is plotted there is from San Francisco to San Diego. Actually, it starts much further up. But this is called the Pacific Coastal Highway, PCH, and it's supposed to be a kind of a dream for many people who want to drive. You want to drive north to south, and typically in a Ford Mustang, which is a high fuel consuming, high-end car. But I leave that thought with you, and I just want some of your ideas as to why I have put this picture and what is the relevance of it to my talk. But we'll come back to that later. I want to introduce this first picture here, and I call these triptychs. Triptychs are ideas in threes. In pedagogy, they tell us that if you talk in 3 ideas at a time, 3 things at a time, then they stick in your mind. The idea of triptych is to have 3 panels of paintings or ideas and how they can influence or how they can stay in your mind and create some kind of a thought process going into you. So the first one is this Monet's famous painting called the Agapanthus triptych. And this was sold for some ridiculous price. I call ridiculous because obviously I'm not in that league, but this was sold in Sotheby's for something like 150 million pounds some years ago. So I call this an expensive triptych. Then I come to other triptych, and this is by Robert Owen, who is a utopian socialist, who coined this phrase: 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. Now, this was in 1817, more than 200 years ago. And before that, there was no regulation of working hours. In fact, in many parts of the world, even today, there is no regulation of working hours. But in most civilized parts of the world, we have 40-hour week or a 35-hour week and all that. And that has originally essentially come from this whole idea. And this I call, so the first one was an expensive triptych. I call this one as a revolutionary triptych. So these are the two sort of examples of an expensive and a revolutionary triptych. But what I want to talk to you about my triptychs, which may not be revolutionary or may not be expensive, but I hope they are of some value. So let's very quickly go through my triptychs. The triptychs are issues and drivers, first of all, and approaches. So what are the issues? So the issues are things like climate change and so on, biodiversity loss. Drivers are positive and negative drivers. So drivers are making things better or making things worse. So if we consume less fossil fuel, the climate change impact will be reduced and so on. And approaches, what are the approaches you take? And I will, of course, talk about my approaches. And my approach is, again, a triptych, which is advice, advocacy, and action. So advice is my first vehicle, that is my consultancy vehicle, where I earn a living. So advice is through which I earn a living. I get my consultancy fees and I have a living. I kind of maintain a lower middle class living standard in the UK. The second one is advocacy, where I am excited about things that other people are doing. I'm not doing those. Those are not my ideas. Those are other people's ideas. And I'm excited about those, and I will speak about them on their behalf, or sometimes without fees, sometimes without expenses, sometimes spending my own money. And that is what is advocacy. And the third bit is what is called as action, where I have committed to myself that for the last 20 years, from about 2001, 2002, I have committed to myself that I will give 10% of my gross income to good causes, what I think are good causes, and which is directly going to the needy people who need it through contacts that I have, mostly in India, because my pounds go much further in India than anywhere else. So advice, advocacy, and action are my triptych. And then, of course, if you look at in general and particularly in India, we have this idea of democracy because we have democracy deep rooted in our society. We have a demography which is in our favor. We have a young population, 65% of Indians are under 35 years of age. And the demand for a product. If there's a good product, if there's a good idea, if there's a good product, if there's a good design, all of that has got a demand because there's so much population. And increasingly, this population is educated, so they know what is good and what is bad. They can discern between these things. And then, of course, coincidentally with that, again, relevant to India also is this question of high population, poverty, and pollution. Indira Gandhi very famously said that poverty pollutes and absolute poverty pollutes absolutely. She rephrased that famous phrase, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But that is not only true. Poverty creates pollution also, but equally affluence also creates pollution. You only have to read the book by Alvin Toffler, The Future Shock, which came in the 70s. That's a thought-changing book, thought-provoking and thought-changing book. Then death, disease, and destruction. So that's another area, and it's even in fact magnified by the recent COVID tsunami, in fact, that we have had in most parts of the world, and India has not been saved from it either. So this whole idea of death, disease, and destruction, which I'll come back to later on. And in fact, I'll come back to all these points a little bit later. Then environment, governance, and change. Now, environment, my very learned and erudite professor, Pat Burney, who wrote the most masterful text on international environmental law, she defined the environment by saying that environment is something that all of us understand what it means, but nobody can define it. And I will leave it at that. But all of us have an idea of what the environment is. Governance, I'll talk about a little bit later. And change is what we are going to talk about, and how to manage change. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on change right from the beginning till the end. The other triptych which I will touch upon is imagine, think, create. This whole idea that unless you imagine things, you cannot, and think about them, you cannot create something. And then I have already talked about my two triptychs in my logo: people, planet, and profit, and equity, justice, and peace. And finally, of course, other triptych, which is this idea that protect the planet that provides. So that has got to be our motto. We are protecting the planet because it provides for us and for no other reason. So anthropocentric view and nothing else. Okay, so when people talk of change, they often cite this quote by Machiavelli, and he talks of nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to handle than to initiate a new order of things. To make any change is very, very difficult, he's trying to say. But what he's trying to say, and he wrote the famous book Prince, and he himself was a prince, he was a ruler. So he is talking about a change that is imposed from outside. Whereas I am talking about a different kind of change. I'm talking about a change that comes from within. So uh, let me take a lighter movement. My mother often said that when you give a talk, tell a joke, because if they don't remember what you spoke about, they'll at least remember the joke. So the Dalai Lama goes to a pizza parlor and orders a pizza. And the guy at the pizza parlor, the person taking the order, says, "What sort of pizza would you like, sir?" And he says, "Make me whole with everything. Make me one with everything," in a kind of a philosophical, tongue-in-cheek way. Make me one with everything. So anyway, he pays for the pizza, gets the pizza delivered, and starts to eat the pizza, but the change is not coming, and he's getting a little perturbed because he's not got the change back from his $20 that he's paid. So then he finishes eating the pizza finally, and then he can't wait. And so he goes back to the chap who's taken the order, and he says, "What about my change?" And he says, "The change must come from within, sir." So that's the important thing. The change must come from within. So that's the key of my entire work. And this has been said by Mahatma Gandhi, and he said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." So if you want to change the world, start from yourself. And that's how it must come from within. Or you think of Mahatma Gandhi as our great philosophical leader, but then think of a great pop singer, Michael Jackson, and he talked of man in the mirror. So when he talked about the man in the mirror or the woman in the mirror, he was talking exactly what Mahatma Gandhi said. So pick your hero, Mahatma Gandhi or Michael Jackson, doesn't matter, but that's what we want to do. We want to bring the change from within. So governance and government and governance are the words that we want to discuss. Government is an entity, basically. So when we talk of the Indian government, that's the government. And governance is the process, is what they are doing. So it's a new buzzword. Governance is a new buzzword in development discourse. It's not just used in the context of national governments, but it's also used in the governance of universities, governance of organizations, governance of public sectors, private sectors, and so on. Governance of homes, in fact. So some of these things that are important in governance are public sector management, transparency, legal framework, accountability, and information. These are the key components of governance. In the UK, we have something called the UK Committee on Standards in Public Life. There was this great scandal here called Cash for Questions, and an MP was implicated in that. And as a result of this, Neil Hamilton, the MP, had to resign and had to, I think, go to serve a jail sentence. But then there was a Lord Neil and Lord Nolan Commission set up to look at the standards in public life. And these are the criteria for, so if you apply for any position in the government, you have to prove that you fulfill the criteria for each one of these 7 criteria by way of the actual things that you have done in terms of selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. And governance, as I said, is a process, and governance architecture is to achieve both horizontal and vertical integration. That is very important. So sectoral integration and integration across levels must happen. So right from local, like we have in Panchayati Raj or Gram Panchayat or something in India, going all the way to the national government. So that will be the levels, and the sectors will be education, universities, industries, agriculture, and so on. So both top down and bottom up approaches must be taken into account. Multi-scalar, macro to micro, small scale, large scale, and multi-level, local to regional to global. So that's a very important approach. So the challenge of governance in our times is best encapsulated in this conversation between Louis Fisher, the biographer of Mahatma Gandhi. In fact, the movie was based on his novel, on his biography. He asked, "Mr. civilization And the Mahatma, in his usual tongue-in-cheek way, said that would be a splendid idea. So what he's trying to say is that the Western civilization has made a lot of mistakes, and we don't want to repeat those mistakes if you want to have good governance. So here's my first approach, and I call it advice, as I told you. And the advice consists of masterclass, and I call it the 7 pillars of governance. And the 7 pillars are listed there. The idea of masterclass came to me when my mentor, Elizabeth Mann Borghese, died in 2002 in February. And within 10 days of her death, my father also had a untimely heart attack, and he died as well. So within 10 days of each other, I lost the 2 most important people who have influenced me apart from my mother. And in December, we were paying tribute to Elizabeth Mann Borghese in Paris at UNESCO. And I gave my talk, and I came back and sat down. And I thought of these 7 pillars, and I wrote down literally on the back of an envelope. And I talked to a lady who was sitting to me, a professor in Norway and Portugal. And I said, Alice, if I prepare a series based on this, would give me an opportunity to speak at your university in Portugal and Norway? And she said, okay, challenge for you. We are talking in December now. If you can do it by March, I will give you 10 lectures each in Norway and in Portugal. And I did that, and that's where this whole thing developed. The idea of the 7 pillars, the title comes from P. Lawrence, the famous Lawrence of Arabia, from his unreadable, and I say this unkindly in a way, because I found it really unreadable. So his unreadable book called 7 Pillars of Wisdom. So I took the title from there. It's like a book that everybody has on their bookshelf, just like Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time, but nobody has actually gone through the book and read it all. So that's what these 7 pillars are. Now, the idea of the masterclass is giving these lectures based on these 7 pillars. The shortest of those lectures is normally 30 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that. The longest, the whole module will go up to about 30, 36 hours, depending on how much, obviously, I'm paid and how much time people have to listen to me. So anyway, more about that later. So first of all, science and technology. I see science and technology as a quest for seeking knowledge and acquiring wisdom. So science is like knowledge. Science is collection of ideas, collection of information, really, more than anything else. Collection and collation of information. Technology is the application of science, and that is what is wisdom. So just take an example of nuclear science and nuclear technology. So nuclear science is the knowledge about how nucleuses operate within themselves, and what does the technology do? Now you can use it for making nuclear bombs, or you can use it for making nuclear energy. So possible, that's technology and that's wisdom. So that's the distinguishing factor between science and technology in my mind: knowledge and wisdom. And of course, Rumsfeld, who recently died, and I'm completely opposed to his idea of warmongering, but he had this very thing quote. He's talked about known knowns, known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. So basically, he said that there are things that we know that we know, and that's true in science. So that's not important because we already know what we know. But then there's something that we know that we don't know. So those are known unknowns. So things that we know that we don't know. But then the fourth one, keep the third one for on the side for a bit. But the last one is the most important in science, which is unknown unknowns. So things that we don't even know that we don't. And those are the ones scientists work on. You know, the blue sky research that we talk about. But the third one is even more important in my mind, and that's called unknown knowns. So things that we know, but we pretend that we don't know in our hubris, in our ignorance, or in our hubris, or both. There's a famous quote that comes to my mind all the time, and that's by General Sam from the Vietnam War. And he says, it is very, very difficult to dispel ignorance as long as you retain arrogance. And that's what it is. So Mahatma Gandhi used to talk of the arrogance of the educated. We know it all, but we don't know. And that's where science is important. And then it's about dreams. And again, this is different Lawrence, D.H. Lawrence, the famous novelist. He famously wrote about dreams, and he said, it's not the kind of dreams dreams when you sleep, but those that won't let you sleep. And those are the kind of dreams that scientists want to dream. Imagine, think, create. I talked about that earlier. That's the motto also of the World Intellectual Property Organization. And famously, Einstein, none other, used to always say that imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination is more important than knowledge, because knowledge is limited, imagination is unlimited. So only when you can imagine crazy things, then you can think about them and how to bring them into reality, and then you create things. So that's why it's the motto of the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's the process in our mind. You first imagine things, then you think how can you make them into reality, and you actually then create them. Now, cynics might say that modern technology owes ecology an apology. We have ruined the environment because of science and technology. But that's not quite true, because it's a double-edged sword. Science and technology has led us to global environmental issues, the problems that we have, but science and technology will also provide us with the solutions, as it is doing as we go along. So my mentor, Elizabeth Mann Borghese, often used to say, utopians of today are realists of tomorrow. Realists of tomorrow are dead tomorrow. So it is good to be a utopian. It is good to be a dreamer. It's good to be John Lennon and sing the song Imagine. So the next pillar is geopolitical economy. So where is stuff produced? And I use the word stuff because I'm going to talk about stuff a little bit later. So where are things produced, and where are they consumed? And who benefits, and where do the benefits accrue? So many times what happens is you utilize the resources. I mean, it happens in all sorts of places. I mean, you see in India itself, states like Bihar and Jharkhand, who have the most natural resources, are the least developed, because what's happening is somebody else is getting the benefit. So this whole concept in economics of socialization of costs and privatization of benefits has got to change. And this whole idea of recognition, there is a carbon trail for everything that we do. The carbon trail from production to consumption to residue to waste. All of that is a carbon trail, and we have to think of a circular economy and not a linear economy of production, consumption, and residue. So this whole idea of reduce, reuse, recycle, all those things have to come into picture in a circular economy. And then transboundary nature of impacts. We have realized that nothing is limited locally, whether it is pollution, whether it is pollution of air, pollution of land, pollution of water, all of this is transboundary. And disasters, Boxing Day tsunami, and so on. And sadly, epidemics and pandemics, that the kind of which we are seeing now. These are all global. You cannot say that, oh, this is only my problem, and I can do something about it. No, when you create a problem, it's a global problem. And animals remain within their environmental limits, but humans live everywhere, leading to unsustainability. That's the main reason, because we want to live in the North Pole, we want to live in the South Pole, and we want to live everywhere in between. And that's why we need enormous amounts of heating and air conditioning and clothing and so on and so forth. There's a schoolyard joke which says, why don't polar bears eat penguins? And that's because polar bears live in the North Pole and penguins live in the South Pole, and that's their environment, and that's their environmental limit, and that's where they live. So the economy, Herman Daly, a very famous economist, he says, the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, not the reverse. So if the environment survives, your economy will survive and thrive, otherwise not. So in fact, Professor at LSE, Lord Stern, in 2005, I think, 2006, I think, wrote this very, very, very huge tome called The Economics of the Environment. In fact, it was called the Stern Report. His name is Stern. So he talks about the economics of the environment. In fact, coincidentally, earlier this year, Partha Dasgupta, who is a famous economist at Cambridge University, also came out with a huge report called The Economics of Biodiversity. So they're both extremely readable. They are very long. They're about 700 pages each, but they also have short executive summaries, and they're well worth reading. So institutions and organizations, what sort of institutions and organizations do you want to create? So you want to obviously create democratic organizations, although Churchill very famously said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all the others that have been tried. So of course we don't know anything better than democracy. So democracy is currently the best form of government or institution building. So what we want is voting, not veto. And preferably what we want is consensus. So all issues that if they are solved through consensus, and I'll come back to that a little bit later, that will help. And consensus people sometimes think that consensus means dilution of issues or compromise with issues. No, consensus comes through dialogue. Consensus comes through conversations. Consensus comes through understanding each other and each other's situation. Again, I'll talk a little bit about that, the intransigent positions that we take. So deal with the more amicable and easier issues first to build confidence, and then move on to the more difficult issues. And the key thing has got to be, and again talking about government and governance, moving out of file. File is government, bureaucracy, and moving into life of the people, and that is the action. So basically you're moving from government to governance. We keep talking about minimum government, maximum governance, though nobody does that. But you know, as they say, that election campaigns are run in poetry and administration happens in prose. And that's true, but everybody promises that there'll be minimum government and maximum governance, but that doesn't actually seem to happen. But that's what we want to have: less government and more governance. So the beauty of democracy is that it somehow creates an ecosystem of checks and balances, or at least it should create the checks and balances through independent organizations, independent judiciary, independent executive, independent decision-making bodies, and so on, or at least it should. So legislation and implementation. So here, this is an important topic and close to my heart, because obviously my expertise in the law of the sea and international environmental law. So the key thing is in this legislation implementation is the continuous development, periodic review, and uniform application of the rule of law. And that is all these three keywords there or phrases are extremely crucial. You must continuously develop your law. You must periodically review it and chop and change. And it must be applied uniformly. It is not show me the person and I'll show you the rule. It's got to be uniformly applied to everywhere, to everybody. Environmental law, international environmental law particularly, is one of the fastest growing disciplines of international law currently. Then, of course, we have something called the Latin phrase called jus cogens, which are peremptory norms. So just as we decided in 1948 and then later that genocide was a crime against humanity, now the environmentalists are talking about ecocide, and ecocide being a crime against the planet. You know, so pollution is a crime against the environment or the planet, as is genocide crime against humanity. And we call that peremptory norms or jus cogens, norms that cannot be debated or discussed. You know, if I say that committing murder is wrong, it is wrong. There is no debate or discussion about it. Genocide is wrong. Pollution is wrong. And exhortative principles. And this is one of my logos. I call it do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Not because it's a popular thing to do, not because it will make you money, not because it will win you the next election, but do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And that's the exhortative principles. Rights and duties must go together. Then covenant without the sword. Thomas Hobbes, a very famous political philosopher, he wrote a book called Leviathan. And in that, he talked about crime and punishment. So he says that unless the law is accompanied by a sword, then it is mere words. But that's the old concept, and we have to move from there. So we have to move from this idea of crime and punishment, from the idea of polluter pays principle, which is, you know, if you pollute, you must pay. It's called a sic utere tuo principle in Latin, to the precautionary principle, which is primum non or primum nil nocere. That means first do no harm. This is a Hippocratic oath that the doctors take, and they say they will do no harm first. You know, so in their medication, their surgery, in whatever they do, whatever procedures they do, they will do no harm. That's the oath that they have to take. Primum non nocere. And I just want to give an example. Homer Simpson, who's our popular nuclear work, cartoon character. And if you look at his own area of work, nuclear in industry, the nuclear liability, that means holding somebody responsible for nuclear incident, that regulation convention came in the 1960s, whereas nuclear safety came in 1990s. So 30 years later, roughly 3 decades later. Now that's wrong. What should have been done, talk about nuclear safety and how can nuclear industry be made safe, and then talk about the nuclear liability. So the whole idea has got to be moving from precautionary principle, moving from the polluter pays principle to the precautionary principle. So, and I say this is again one of my, I think hopefully it's my own sort of copyright if I'm not, if somebody has said earlier, I don't know. But our world is getting increasingly lawless. And when I mean lawless, yes, in that sense too, in the sense of law, but also getting increasingly landless because our nitrogen cycle is disrupted very badly. Airless, our air is getting polluted and unbreathable. And our water is so contaminated that in many places undrinkable, and in many places water is not even available. So that's how I look at it. And that has got to change. The next pillar, and the fifth pillar, is stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder is all of us, you, me, all of us are stakeholders. Each one of us, each entity, each organization, a university, organization, industry, whatever, they're all stakeholders. The United Nations lists them, and if you see the list from the Agenda 21, the first two are women, children, and youth, because women and youth are very important. Women are 50% of the world. Now yesterday we had the cabinet reshuffle and we have 9 women ministers, if I'm not mistaken. But remember the total number is 77. So we have a huge way to reach there. Women are 50% of the world and youth will live in that world tomorrow, not us. We will be dead and gone. But it's these youth who will live. 65% of the people under the population under the age of 35, they are the ones who are going to be residing in that world. So we have to focus on women and children as the main stakeholders. And I have another hashtag which I often use in my social media, and I call it "Women will work wonders worldwide." Women will write wonders worldwide. So that's what my other hashtag logo is. So role of civil society is all of us, as I said, governments, non-governmental organizations, industry, commerce, you and I. And of course, the important thing there we often talk about is this whole idea of corporate social responsibility, giving back to the society. But what about individual social responsibility? And I'll talk about that a little bit later. It is our moral duty to give, and that's something else I want to talk about a little bit later. So, as John Donne famously said, "No man is an island." We have created islands for ourselves. If you think of this concept of pin diagram that I want to just talk about for a minute, if you think of volcanic atolls, and they show up on the sea surface, and you can see only the tip of them. And those are the positions that we take. We take in transition positions. We are all important, self-important. We are full of hubris. You know, I'm a consultant in ocean governance. I'm the greatest, God's greatest gift to mankind, I think. Somebody a farmer, somebody a scientist, somebody a doctor, whatever. Everybody thinks they're very important. So you create those positions, and those positions are quite distinct and quite in transition. Nobody wants to compromise. But if you go a little bit down under the surface of the sea, then you will see the issues. And the issues are common. The issues are common to all of us. We all need to drink. We all need to eat. We all need to have a clothing and shelter. And if you see further down, the foundation of everything, the needs are very common. The needs are common to all of us. Indira Gandhi famously talked about roti, kapda, and makan, which was her slogan. And that's true for everybody, whether you are the richest or the poorest. You still need those 3 things. You still need food, clothing, and shelter. So Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones, he's got this famous song, and he says, "You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you find you get what you need." Mahatma Gandhi famously said that there's enough in the world for the need of everybody, but not enough in the world for the greed of anybody. So you pick your hero, Mick Jagger or the Mahatma, but do the right thing. Always think of your need and not your greed. So there is enough in the world for everybody's need. So environmental issues are best handled with the participation of all concerned citizens, all of them, women, children, and all of them as they're listed in the Agenda 21's Principle 10. Then, of course, I have said that we want to do the right things because it's the right thing to do. But to do the right things, you need money. So financial initiatives, where will you get money to do the right things that you want to do? So there are various ways of getting money, and I've listed some here: public-private partnership, which we all are familiar with, private finance initiatives. In public sector, we always use that. Foreign direct investment, nation states often doing that. In fact, Ireland here is one of the greatest examples of a poor country to a rich, prosperous country, surely because of foreign direct investment. And of course, there are these multilateral development finance institutions, such as the World Bank Group, which is listed there, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the International Finance Corporation, and so on. Then regional development banks, and we have, of course, the Asian Development Bank in our region, but Europe has got one, Latin America has got one, and Africa has got one as well. So these are the banks that give credits, and the idea is come from what the idea of the Global Environment Facility of the World Bank, and all the other banks as well, and all the other multilateral development finance institutions give you what are called as matching grants for incremental environmental amelioration. So if you make your environment that much better, these organizations will give you matching grants. So if that costs you X amount of money, the organization, these banking financial institutions will give you a matching grant to cover your costs and perhaps even more. So this is where I use this word stuff, and that's what I want to emphasize here. Enterprises do stuff, organizations, businesses do stuff to make money, but environmentalists like me need money to do stuff, and that's why financial initiatives are very important. And finally, of course, my favorite pillar. Now, when I talk about these 7 pillars, the 7 pillars are like, a structure with 6 pillars around, and the central pillar in the middle holding all the 6 together. And of course, all of us, if you see now, if you think, cast your minds back to these 7 pillars, we all belong to at least one of these pillars, if not more. So each one of us can adopt one of the pillars as our own. And excuse me, and nurture and develop that pillar and treat the other pillars as the supporting pillars. And that's my concept. So education awareness, both formal and informal. What we do in classrooms, as the Vice Chancellor was saying earlier. So what we do in classrooms is important, but what we do outside the classroom is also important. Elizabeth Mann Borghese often called everybody children from the age of 8 to 80. She said, at the age of 8, little animals become human beings. So that's when we become kind of sentient. And then up to the age of 80, now, of course, my mother is 89, and she is as curious and as enthusiastic about learning new things. And that's what it is. We have to be curious. Curiosity or inquisitiveness is the criteria. Apparently, when you're a toddler, they ask questions. There was a program on TV here recently, and they said that a child asks the question why, how, when, where, these kind of questions, a child can insistently ask about 300-400 times a day, But as you get older, we become either ignorant or you become arrogant, and we stop asking questions because we think we know too much. We know everything. So anyway, so training of mid-career professionals, continuing professional development, as we call it here, training of researchers, lawyers, civil servants, even politicians. One of the largest workshops that I conducted was in the Azores for the Parliamentary Assembly for the Council of Europe, where about 800 parliamentarians from all over Europe, all European countries attended the workshop, which was morning and afternoon. Then contribution to work with a range of organizations, local to global, in the area of governance. So this is what I do, but everybody, all of us can do. Facilitation of stakeholder dialogues, mediation and arbitration. And that's the kind of work I do, sometimes not formally, but informally, because formally you need to have qualifications to do that. Promoting awareness through speaking engagements, the kind of speaking engagements that I have. And of course, education is a wealth that grows when you give it away. It's a unique thing. Everything else, if you give away, you will have less. But education is something that grows as you give it away. I told my decades of students that I learn more from them than they learn from me, because I'm only one person, and they are 20, 30, 40, 50, 90, whatever. And they teach me more than I learn from, they learn from me. So, and there's a link between education and environmental protection, because if you see this famous saying, famous quote by Baba Dioum, he said this in a conference in Delhi, at an IUCN conference, and he said, in the end, we will protect only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. So that's my thing about the 7 pillars. And I'm now going to introduce my other 2 approaches. So that was advice. I'm going to talk about advocacy and action. And mercifully, it's only a couple of slides each, so please bear with me. So I want to introduce, first of all, before I go into advocacy, I want to introduce sustainable development goals. Now, as all of you are familiar, there are 17 sustainable development goals. There's only one, unfortunately, that focuses on the ocean or the sea, life below water, and that's both the ocean and fresh water. So that already you can see there is such limited importance given to the ocean. Oceans are, in a different perspective, if you take, they're not just 70% of the Earth's surface, but they are 99%, mind you, of the biosphere. They also take 90% of pollution. They produce 25% of oxygen. They absorb 50% of carbon dioxide, 50 to 80%, in fact, of carbon dioxide. They are responsible for 95% of carriage of goods by sea. All the goods by sea, there's 95% of goods worldwide are carried by maritime transport. 99% of maritime cables, they are all under the sea. So all this cloud, in fact, this conversation that we're having now is not in the air. So-called cloud is not in the air, but it's under the sea. So anyway, the seas are very important. Roger Rivera, famous ocean scientist from Scripps, he famously said that we know more about the backside of the moon than the bottom of the ocean. In fact, James Clark, no, sorry, the famous science fiction writer whose name just escapes me, he wrote that we should not call planet Earth, we should call it planet Ocean. So anyway, more about that later, another time. So advocacy, this is my second approach. It is our ethical duty to give. So that's my sort of main take from here. And in 1970s, early 1970s, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries, there are 38 of them, they voluntarily committed that they will give 0.7% of their GDP to overseas development assistance. We call it aid. But even as of today, most of them have not reached 0.7%. The United States, which is the biggest single donor, only gives about 0.1 or 0.15%. The UK has just about reached it for the last few years. Some of the small countries, some of the small Nordic countries, they have reached almost 1%, but their contribution is small because they are tiny countries. Their GDP is small. So nobody has, as a whole, the world has not reached 0.7. Now the OECD commitment and the membership of OECD is similar to NATO, but if you look at the defense spending, they all, the OECD countries, the NATO countries spend US spends 3.7% and wants other countries to spend more than 2%. So we cannot spend, we can spend 2, 3, 4%, and some countries are spending even more. Some of the countries, even India spends about 4 or 5%, and Pakistan spends even more, and so on. Saudi Arabia spends a lot. Qatar spends a lot of money on defense. China. So we are ready to spend so much money on defense, but not for giving. And of course, there's this why give test, and that's where my first picture comes in. And I want to tell you very quickly that when I first went to the US, when I was just become a professional, I went to the US and I knew all the time that there's this iconic thing that one does, goes on the Pacific Coastal Highway, Ford Mustang, but I couldn't afford it. The next few visits I went to the US, when I didn't, that first time I didn't have the money. The second time, the next few occasions, I had money, but I didn't have the time. I was too busy doing what I was doing. And the last time, or the most recently that I went, I had both the money and time, and I could easily rent a Ford Mustang and drive down, and I had time also several days to do that. But then I thought, rather than doing that and spending the money for doing that, why not put that to my 10%, or maybe try to make that 11%? And that's where we have to give. And there's a test. Singer, the famous environmentalist, Peter Singer, has got a test, and we can, it's there in the literature. So what does it mean in resource terms? If you just do that 0.7% according to the OECD's commitment, it can do year after year dealing with death, disease, and destruction. It can service the Sustainable Development Goal. Currently, at the current rate of OECD GDP, you will collect something of the order of $500 billion every year through 0.7 ODA. So servicing of Sustainable Development Goals takes about $250 to $300 billion. That will leave you still another $250 billion to deal with death, disease, and destruction. When something like Corona comes, developing the vaccine, etc., you can pay money for doing that. And of course, natural disaster mitigation. Natural disasters are getting more frequent and more severe. And again, they need money all the time to deal with those. So again, the thing to remember is, to those that hunger, those that are hungry, give them bread. To those that have bread, give them the hunger for justice. So that's what education will bring. When people know more about things, they will ask for justice. They will fight for justice. And the final approach is action. And again, my logo there, or my motto there is build toilets, not temples. This is something my mother used to say right from when I became sentient, right from when I was like, 7, 8 years old. My mother has been saying, don't build toilets, don't build temples, build toilets. And of course, now slowly our government has woken up to it, and we are now water and sanitation situation in India is improving, but still not. So we still have too little water, lack of access to clean drinking water and sanitation. The situation is likely to get worse, not just in India, but in many other parts of the world. You can already see the temperatures are going up. The water situation is is really quite dire, quite scarce, and scary. In fact, I read, I don't know whether I'm correct or not, you might want to correct me, but I read somewhere that only 2 cities in India have running tap water, Kota in Rajasthan and Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala. Everywhere else, you have to have these overhead tanks and sumps and pumps and your own well and so on and so forth. Much of women's life, and this again is very important from gender issues, much of women's life is spent collecting wood, water and firewood in many parts of the developing world, leaving them very little time for self-advancement, very little time for education, for culture, for social interaction or anything. And again, we have water everywhere. We are surrounded by water. I mean, India has got 7,500 kilometers of coastline, but mostly it's untreated and contaminated water, including rainwater. In fact, now when it rains, the rainwater itself is contaminated because of the pollutants in the air. And then, of course, wrong kind of water, too much water, particularly in the coastal areas. In Chennai, you're quite familiar how your water table is getting affected by water abstraction. And of course, in small island states, and small island developing states are, as they are called, SIDS, or the Association of Small Island States, AOSIS. They are very worried about the situation because of the shortage of water, and particularly the wrong kind of water. So the change has to happen, and we don't see change when it's happening. We only see change when it will happen, because change takes a long time, especially if you want to make societal changes. Scientific understanding is quicker, but making it into policy takes a longer time, and making your society to understand it, to get it down there, thinking, it takes much longer. So the whole process can be sometimes quite long, and can be sometimes as long as 100 years from scientific discovery to actually social acceptance. So again, that's very important, and we have to keep chipping at it. We cannot take time. And then there's a boy walking on a beach, on a hot day, and the beach is strewn with starfish, and he's picking up a starfish and throwing it into the sea. And he keeps on doing that all the time. He basically bends down every time, picks up a starfish and throws it into the sea. There's an old man passing by, and he asks the young boy, he says, "Young man, what are you doing?" He says, "I'm throwing the starfish into the sea, and hopefully that will save its life." And the old man says, "But the beaches of the world are strewn with millions of starfish. How much difference are you going to make?" And he bends down, the little boy, picks up another starfish and throws it in the sea and says, "It's made a difference to that one." So that's the kind of change we want to bring. We want to, Mahatma Gandhi used to talk of Antyodaya or Sarvodaya and Antyodaya, the last man standing, from John Ruskin's famous idea. So, and that's what it is, the last man standing. So you have to help every last person individually, one by one. So again, a quote attributed to the Mahatma, and he says, when you're doing change, first they laugh at you, then they ignore you, and then once you get more important, they start fighting. In the end, you win, and that's what we have to be. In the title of a popular Bollywood movie, it would be, I would say, "Lage raho munna bhai." Keep on chipping at it. That's what our aim should be. And finally, thank you for listening. My contact details are there, the email and my WhatsApp and my website address are there. Please feel free to circulate this video, the recording of this to people, to anybody who you wish to. And please, I'm very happy to have had this opportunity to talk to you, and I'll be really pleased to have any questions, comments, criticism, and questions and debate and discussion. Thank you.
Yep.
I will just stop sharing.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shastri. That was really a drive on the US West Coast to Michael Jackson, Mahatma Gandhi, and of course Munnabai also. Before we go into the question answer session, just to add my 2 bit, it was Arthur C. Clarke who said that how strange it is that we call it planet Earth.
It just skipped my mind temporarily, but thank you for telling me. Yes, Arthur C. Clarke, famous science fiction writer.
Yeah, that was really nice, sprinkled with a lot of puns and quotes. So now I would invite the attendees to pose questions to Dr. Shastri, please.
No questions. I do expect something from the faculty.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, Tejaswini, yes.
Yes, all right. Hello, sir. Thank you for this wonderful session. I think you kept us engaged throughout, and it was really fun. I have a question on the sustainable development goals that you actually briefly touched upon. And I was probably considering that air pollutants and greenhouse emissions, impact the sustainable development goals as well, right? Because we have affordable and clean energy, and also you have climate action, and our industry is definitely a part of it. So, in your opinion, can you share what is that one thing that you think the industry can do? Actually, the short term, because I think long term we have a lot of plans, but if there's something that you think that the industry can do in the short term to help mitigate this or reduce.
Thank you, Tejaswini. That's a very, very good question, and a very, very broad-ranging question, really. But I will try to answer it in several ways. The first and foremost thing that we have to do, as all of us, as individuals, as governments, as industry, or whatever, is plant trees. If you listen to the recent dialogues between Richard Attenborough on the one hand, who is a octogenarian famous man, and Greta Thunberg, who is a teenager, and they talk often along with George Monbiot, and they have come out with this simple solution. They say the simple solution is trees. We have to have, and you'll see a hashtag sometime in the social media. It talks of trillions of trees, trillions of trees. So that's what we want. And it's not just trees. And we have the coastal area. Bangladesh, in fact, is doing really well on this front recently. You have to have mangroves. I mean, we have got, like I said, 7,500 kilometers of coastline. Industry, individuals, government organizations, non-governmental organizations have to focus on three areas of the coast. One is the immediate coast, the intertidal zone, and there you have to have mangrove forests. Number one. Then you go a little bit deeper into the sea, and of course, because I'm more of an expert on the ocean matters, I'll focus on the sea. Little bit deeper into the coastal area, and there you have got something called seagrass or kelp forests. We have to develop those. We have to have more of those. We have to plant. And then if you go somewhat little bit more deeper, then you very unique species they are. They are animals, they are living, they're also full of minerals, and they're also vegetable. All three combined together. No other organism is that pronounced as the coral reef. So again, coral reefs, contrary to misunderstanding that they will be lost and they'll be lost forever, no, they can be regenerated. They can be, you can have, just as you can have, you can have plantations, you can one on the other. So similarly, you can do that on the coral reefs. So basically, trees on land, and the trees have, when you plant trees, you have to ensure that they reach the diameter, the main diameter of the tree, of the trunk, reaches 10 inches. Until it reaches 10 inches, it is vulnerable. Once it reaches 10 inches, then you can leave it, and then it will find its own water, it will find its own nutrients, it will find everything. But it has to reach 10 inches, and that is on land. And the same thing with mangrove forests. You have to have a lot of mangrove forests, you have to have a lot of kelp forests, and we have to have corals. So these three together systems in the marine ecosystem are going to be our saviors alongside trees on land. So that's as far as the water pollution is concerned, air pollution is concerned. Now, the other thing that the industry can do, and this is where you need political will, because if you look at the climate change discussions, one of the simplest conclusion that IPCC has come out with is that we know what the problems are, we know what the solutions are, but we don't have the political will. Even today, despite everything, we still don't have the political will. And the political will has got to be to change, to move from fossil fuel drastically. You have to move drastically away from fossil fuel and move to renewable energies. And again, I might sound controversial here, very, very controversial here, but the golden bridge between fossil fuels and renewables is nuclear. Okay. So you have to move very quickly, because nuclear is a technology that is available to us. So move from fossils as soon as possible to renewables, to wind energy, to wave energy, to tidal energy, to solar energy. There is no shortage of solar energy worldwide, everywhere in the world. Even in the cloudiest part of the world, such as where we live, mostly it is gray and gray skies. Even here, the solar energy is adequate to supply energy to the households and everywhere. So we have to move from fossil to renewables, perhaps by using, again, I say very controversially, to use nuclear as a golden bridge, I call it. So I think that would be my short take on, or rather long take on your question. But there are more initiatives that can be taken, both by industry and by the governments. And the big thing is it has to come from the industry and from the government. The user often is made to feel guilty. The user is often made to feel guilty. The user only uses what is provided to him or her. So So we can also do some small changes, such as putting LED bulbs in our houses, such as not driving to short distances, such as not owning a car, if possible. I often tell people, don't own a car. That is the best thing to do. If you own a car, own an electric car. Okay. Use public transport to the extent possible, walk, cycle, but we can do those things individually, but the main push, the political will, has got to come from the government, and the industry has to follow suit, and the industry will follow suit only when the government pushes them, when the policy pushes them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think very actionable, and we could understand and relate to everything that you said, about the forests, and got to learn a lot. Thank you so much.
Good evening, sir. Am I
Hello.
audible? Yeah, good evening.
Yes,
Am I
thank you.
audible?
Yes, is that Yogamala? Yes.
Yeah. Sir, I have one question regarding this Basel ban amendment. So, what are
Okay,
the
I didn't understand.
implications of Basel ban amendment on the
Oh, yes,
Indian
okay.
on the Indian shipbreaking industry, sir? Because India is a non-signatory member of the Basel ban, though it is a member of Basel Convention. With the Basel ban,
Yes.
certain things are going to change, and so that what are the implications of this Basel ban convention on the Indian shipbreaking industry?
Okay. Now, again, now this is a sort of a involved topic. The Basel Convention is on the transboundary disposal of hazardous waste. Okay, that's the one you're
Yes,
talking
sir.
about.
Yeah.
So the Basel Convention is on the transboundary control of and disposal of hazardous waste. It is also in conjunction with two other conventions. It's called the Basel Convention, Stockholm Convention, and the Rotterdam Convention. You're probably familiar with all three of them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And the secretariat for all those three is together: Basel Convention, Stockholm Convention, and the Rotterdam Convention. Now,
yes.
the thing is, India and Bangladesh are the two countries which have the dubious distinction of being the leading countries in shipbreaking.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now the thing is, it is an industry that is required. It is necessary, because obviously old ships have got to be dismantled or decommissioned, as you call them. But that has got to be done on in a manner which is compatible with health and safety issues.
Yes, sir.
The way in which our shipbreaking industry operates in India or in Bangladesh is quite unsafe at this time for people who are working there. So I think that is where the question of the Basel Convention not accepting or not supporting this particular activity in India. I think, but India has now become signatory to the Hong Kong Convention recently.
But which is not in force, and Basel ban amendment came into effect on December 5th, 2019, and we are not a signatory member for that. So then where is the legal regime to regulate the shipbreaking activities, especially in Alang as well as Bangladesh and Pakistan, sir, where more than 90% ships are break?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I think our own governments, so it doesn't matter whether you are party to the convention or not, but our own Ministry of Environment can look into this matter. Ministry of Shipping can look into this matter. So I think what we have to do is we have to stipulate our own standards, our own standards, which may not be acceptable to them or whatever, that doesn't matter. But as long as they are standards that are safe for our people, and our activities can see, what happens is when you are creating a problem for yourself by unsafe working environments, then you are reducing the benefit or the business that you are getting. The business might be going to, if the Bangladesh people do better in terms of their health and safety, or if Pakistan does better in terms of health and safety,
no, sir.
The business might.
Sir, shall I interfere?
Yes.
Sir, sir, what is happening? We are not a signatory member for the Basel ban. So now we are
Yes.
discussing, our discuss is focused on the Basel Ban Amendment. It is just one amendment to the Basel Convention, as you know very well. And so that here, what is happening, we are not a signatory member, and that particular amendment is insisting the developed countries, OECD countries, as well as the Liechtenstein, not to export their hazardous waste to the non-signatory members. Non-signatory members. So this is the amendment made in the 2019 December 5th. So after that, legally, we are not supposed to receive the vessels which are coming from these nations, sir. Legally, we are not supposed to receive. At the same time, they are not supposed to export. And almost 80% of the vessels are coming from the OECD countries as well as the Liechtenstein, and one more Liechtenstein, OECD, and UK related, that developed European countries. European countries. So what is happening with that? Whatever activities, shipbreaking activities are happening, it is, we can consider it as, or shall we consider it as a illegal activity internationally or globally, sir? Because they are not supposed to export, but we are getting imported.
Basically what is happening is that the Basel, the Western countries, the European Union and the other countries, other shipping nations, they are bypassing the convention. So they are on one hand they are banning. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But on the other hand, the ships are still coming. So
where is the implementation mechanism then? So then what is the way out?
So
we are not paying attention on that.
So what is happening there is they are using a third source, a third country, to pass on the ships to us. So basically what they are doing is they are selling it to another country which is not a signatory, which is then sending it to us. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Do you get the point? So what happens is that those countries are not supposed to export. So for example, take plastic waste. Okay. So we are not supposed to send to developing countries. We are supposed to take care of our own plastic waste here in the UK. But all that plastic waste is still ending up in Malaysia, Indonesia, China, India, everywhere. How is that happening? UK is not supposed to legally do that. That is happening because what they do is they pass it on to a third country, and it comes from the third country to the next country. So basically, this is a nexus that is happening, and the nexus actually creates that problem. And we have to somehow use our own what you call as our own regulation mechanisms to show that yes, we will only do what is legally right. And we are now members of the Hong Kong Convention, which will get implemented. It's a recent convention. It will get implemented. So we have to think, but we have to also protect our industry because a lot of our people are dependent on it. So there is you have to have this what you call a thin edge. You have to balance. It's a balancing act for both sides, really, in my view.
Sir, shall I talk, sir?
Yeah.
Sir, what is happening? We are a signatory member to the Basel Convention, and Basel Convention clearly says where there is an illegal exportation of hazardous waste, we can send that back. But India, being a major shipbreaking company, that is industry, we are not sending the waste back. Instead of that, we are receiving, we are accepting, and we are seeing our growth on that. And internal regulations, what we are having in India, it is just managing the procedures there and managing the day-to-day dealings, day-to-day business, and we are focusing on the labor rights, we are focusing on the human rights and so many other rights rather than addressing this at the root level, sir.
Yeah,
so that's what happening. We are a signatory member. We have weapon in our hand. We can send the hazardous waste back. We can say no to the shipbreaking. But we are building our economy based on the shipbreaking activity, which is legally not fair, even as per the Basel Convention. We can, because now with the implementation of Basel ban, we are not a signatory member of Basel ban. And again, these developed countries cannot export their waste to us.
Yes, I mean, I see what I see your point, but I see your point, Yogamala. But the point is this: that it is an industry which is significant for India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. Okay.
Of course.
Yes,
sir,
we can technically say that sorry, this is illegal and we will not do it. But you're basically, shooting yourself in the foot, So you have to,
Sir,
you have to find
I
ways.
have a recommendation for this
Yes.
problem. We can
Yes.
recommend the Ministry of Shipping or our central government to be a signatory member of the Basel ban, sir. That is a solution where each and every transaction will be protected by the Basel Convention itself. We have to request, we have to recommend the government to sign the Basel ban amendment, sir, because already we are a signatory member. So that is a way we can, we can make it legal, and we can depend on the shipbreaking industry in India, and we can pursue on that, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
No, your point is absolutely valid. And what I would suggest you do, I presume you're an academic at the Kochi campus of IMU. What you should do is actually write a paper and send that paper to the Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Environment, and say that this is a industry that is significant to India. We want to continue with the industry, but we also want to be legally on the right side. And how can we become members of the Basel Ban Convention? Because India is always looking for opportunities to join. In fact, India is one of the I would say one of the very enthusiastic countries as far as multilateral environmental agreements are concerned.
Yes, sir.
And we have always been positively engaged with many multilateral environmental engagement agreements. So I think you should make a positive contribution by writing a paper, perhaps getting it published in an international or journal, internationally reputed journal. And if you want, you can send me a draft or something, and I can find whether there's a journal that might want to publish it. So
thank you so much,
that
sir.
That will also give some weight. So rather than writing a white paper, and sending it to the ministries in India, if you get it published somewhere and then send it to them, that will create a greater weight, because it will be peer-reviewed paper, and that will have a greater what you call as a credibility.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm doing that, sir. I'm half the way, and soon I'm going to conclude that, and I will I'll forward the draft to you, sir. Thank you so much.
I'll be very happy to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, madam, you have any question, madam? Yeah, I guess we have time for just maybe one more question. Any more coming from the students or faculty?
Let me say a few things just in general. I was talking when I have I got like 5 minutes or something?
Yeah, sure, Dr. Shastri, please go on.
Yeah. So I want to say three different things in 3 ways, basically. I was first talking about social acceptance of scientific understanding. So I want to give 3 very quick examples of that. Fishing, overfishing was recognized as a problem back in the, 19th century, but nobody did anything about it. So we had 19th century, I'm talking about end of 19th century, around 1884, something like that. Overfishing was recognized. There was a conference, and in fact, the president of the Royal Society said that overfishing was a problem. But overfishing, so the scientific recognition came then. But the legal development in the form of United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea came in 1982. So 1884 to 1982. So you're talking about nearly 100 years there. Similarly, when alien species were discovered in the coast of Scotland because of transportation of oil from one part of the other world to the other, by the time they came, people discovered this Odontella species, and they discovered that this was devastating other species in that area. That was in early 1900s, 1904, 1906, something like that. By the time the Ballast Water Convention came, it was 2004. It is still not implemented, or it just got implemented this year, I think. Okay. And similarly, there are other scientific issues. Climate change, for example. Svante Arrhenius, he wrote a paper back in 1894 about global warming. But the Climate Change Convention only came in 1992, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So another 100 years. So 100 years is not unusual for a scientific discovery or scientific knowledge to become a policy reality. And again, policy implementation takes somewhat longer sometimes. So the other 3 points that I wanted to make are our narrative. Our narrative has got to change. Our narrative has always been so far that the planet is too big to ignore. I'm wrong. The planet is too big to that we cannot cause any damage to the planet. Whether it is the ocean or whether it is the earth, we are too insignificant to cause any damage. The planet is too big to suffer from any damage. That is a wrong narrative, because we know that we have caused damage to the planet, damage to the environment, damage to the ecosystem. Then the next narrative, which we have more recently in the last few decades, among some skeptics, is that the damage is already done. We cannot do anything about it. So the problem is too big to solve. So that is the next narrative, which is again the fatalist narrative, and that is wrong also. So the correct narrative is that we cannot ignore the planet, we cannot ignore the ocean. The ocean is too big to ignore, the planet is too big to ignore, and we ignore it only at our own peril. So if you want to do something, the time is now. The United Nations has recently this year launched what is called as the United Nations Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So next 2021 to 2030 is going to be a very active time for development of ocean science. By 2030, we want to protect 30% of the ocean as marine protected area, including areas beyond national jurisdiction. We are also working on many other issues. Climate change is one of the big issues to know of. But even bigger than climate change, we have something called the loss of nitrogen cycle. Our earth, our land is becoming less and less fertile. So our entire basin, agriculture, is getting damaged. And an even bigger problem is the loss of biological diversity. So climate change, nitrogen cycle, loss of nitrogen cycle, and loss of biodiversity. Those three are our big, what we call as existential issues. And we have to do something about it, not because we are protecting the earth or not because we are protecting the planet, but because we have to protect ourselves. If you don't protect the ecosystem, we are the ones who are going to suffer. So that is all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shastri. I think we can go on discussing this. As you have emphasized,
Yes.
The planet is actually something what we have borrowed from our children, as the Indian proverb goes. I think all good things also must come to an end. I think we are reaching a conclusive stage. Madam, would you like to ask or say a few words, Madam?
No, I think I shared my thoughts right in the beginning, and we hope that this conversation can be carried forward, maybe on a bilateral basis between those interested and Professor Shastri. And I hope this has kindled interest in the field, and as we attempt and strive to expand the horizon of the Maritime University. Yes. So thank you for sparing your time, Dr. Shastri.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would request Dr. Muthukrishnan to propose the vote of thanks, please.
Thank you, Dr. Balaji, sir. First of all, I express my, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
First of all, I express my sincere thanks to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Sunil Murali Shastriji, who readily agreed to our request and immediately responded by giving dates for organizing this function. Thank you, sir. You have given global perspective to the environmental issue, and you have enlightened us, our staff members and faculty of this esteemed institute. I thank our Vice Chancellor, Madam, who has started this Maritime Knowledge series. She has opened the portal of this university. Let noble thoughts come from everywhere. Thank you, Madam. We hope this series will continue, and your lecture, we have plans to host it in our website so that anybody who misses today's lecture can also later on have access to this knowledge. Thank you, sir. I thank our Dr. Raju Balaji, sir, our Director Chennai campus, who has readily agreed to conduct the webinar on behalf of our academic section. I thank faculty and students for readily participating in this enlightening lecture and keep deeply engrossed in the discussion. Thank you, one and all. I thank the IT section and all the infrastructure facilities of the university for organizing this function a great success. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor.
Thank you very much.
Director.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.